Back in the days of brick and mortar video rental stores, you had a sea of choice separated by not only release date, but also genre. Go deeper though, and you had the store recommendations, or personal picks, and be it the big chains like Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, or the independent mom and pop stores like my own beloved Video Unlimited, this was your chance to not only find a hidden gem, but to get to know your local purveyor of film. That's precisely what we want to do on tonight's episode of Eject Media. From movie nerds who had just one bad day too many, to the 2010s best cult movie, these are 10 horror movies spanning over 40 years that I, Andrew from Controlling Horror, really enjoy and want to log as my personal picks that I think everyone should check out. While these aren't my top 10 favorite films of all time, they are certainly some of my all-time favorites to get people to watch. Enjoy!
Fade to Black, 1980. A lonely film fanatic lives almost entirely through the movies he watches, measuring the real world against the characters and stories playing on his screen. When personal setbacks and public embarrassments pile up, fantasy starts to bleed into reality, and performance becomes his way of coping. And then something more dangerous. The hook is built around classic cinema obsession. The main character recreates iconic looks and personas from old films, turning familiar Hollywood imagery into something darker and more personal. It gives the movie a layered appeal, part character study, part genre thriller, and part love letter to film history. The lead performance carries nearly every scene, balancing sympathy and unease so the character never feels one note. You understand his isolation even as his choices grow more extreme. The Los Angeles setting adds to that feeling, bright, crowded, and yet completely impersonal, making his disconnect feel even sharper. Tonally, it shifts between dark humor and psychological horror, which keeps it unpredictable. References and visual homages reward movie-savvy viewers, while the central descent story keeps the tension moving forward. This is a standout VHS-era oddity. Not a creature feature or standard slasher, but a media obsession thriller that feels tailor-made for film fans digging through cult catalogs. Event Horizon, 1997. Paul W. S. Anderson's Event Horizon is a sci-fi horror nightmare that blends the aesthetics of Alien with the dread of supernatural possession. Set in deep space, it's a film that asks a terrifying question. What if faster-than-light travel opened not to distant stars, but to a dimension of pure hell? The story follows a rescue crew sent to investigate the Event Horizon, a spaceship that vanished during its maiden voyage and suddenly reappears near Neptune. On board, they discover evidence of the crew's violent deaths and a malevolent force tied to the ship's experimental gravity drive. What begins as a search and rescue quickly devolves into a battle for survival against something beyond human comprehension. Lawrence Fishburne leads the cast as Captain Miller, a pragmatic leader torn between duty and survival. Sam Neill delivers one of his most chilling performances as Dr. Weir, the scientist obsessed with the ship and slowly consumed by its darkness. The rest of the ensemble, including Kathleen Quinlan, Jason Isaacs, and Richard T. Jones, ground the film with a sense of weary realism that makes the horrors all the more impactful. Visually, Event Horizon is striking. The ship itself is designed like a Gothic cathedral in space, filled with shadowy corridors and unsettling architecture. The flashes of the crew's fate, glimpses of torture, mutilation, and madness, are brief but shocking, leaving much to the imagination while still suggesting unspeakable horrors. Coupled with the film's oppressive sound design and eerie score, the atmosphere is unrelenting. Though dismissed on release, Event Horizon has since earned cult status as one of the boldest blends of science fiction and supernatural horror. It's a film where technology and the occult collide, proving that in the void of space there may be things far worse than aliens waiting in the dark. The Devil Rides Out, 1968, Hammer Films adapted Dennis Wheatley's occult thriller with rare seriousness. Christopher Lee stars as the Duc de Richelieu, an aristocrat versed in esoteric knowledge, who discovers that his young friend has been recruited by a dangerous occult group led by the refined but threatening Mokata. What follows is a struggle against dark forces treated with unusual authenticity. The symbols, rituals, and terminology aren't embellishments but integral plot elements. Director Terence Fisher applies Hammer's classic Gothic style to a story grounded in occult conflict. Lee, unusually cast as the heroic lead, brings intelligence and authority to a character who relies on knowledge as much as courage. Charles Gray's controlled, soft-spoken performance as Mokata makes him one of Hammer's most effective antagonists. The film's standout sequence, the protective circle scene, showcases restrained but effective visual effects as the heroes endure waves of supernatural assaults. Fisher emphasizes atmosphere over spectacle, letting suggestion enhance the tension. Serious in tone and carefully researched, The Devil Rides Out became one of Hammer's most sophisticated productions. It remains a defining example of British occult cinema done with craftsmanship and respect for its subject matter. Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, 1995. When Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight hit theaters in 1995, it wasn't just another horror spin-off. It was the franchise's first and only feature-length story that truly captured the show's pulp energy. Directed by Ernest Dickerson, the film turns a motel in the middle of nowhere into the last stand between heaven and hell. Billy Zane stars as the Collector, a charming demon hunting for a mystical key filled with the blood of Christ. Standing in his way is a drifter named Breaker, played by William Sadler, who uses the relic to seal doorways and keep the monsters out. What follows is a siege movie with personality. Equal parts Evil Dead 2, From Dusk Till Dawn, and Saturday Night Cable chaos. The cast is loaded with familiar faces. Jada Pinkett, Before the Smith, Thomas Hayden Church, and Dick Miller, a who's who of 90s genre regulars. Zane steals the show, though, turning his performance into a demonic carnival act. Every line is delivered like he knows he's in the coolest B-movie ever made. The effects are gloriously practical. Gallons of slime, rubber creatures, and enough blue lighting to fill a decade. It's loud, wild, and self-aware, without becoming parody. Despite strong reviews from horror fans, Demon Knight was overshadowed by flashier studio releases and a weak follow-up, Bordello of Blood. But time's been kind to it. Demon Knight stands as a perfect snapshot of mid-90s horror. Inventive, funny, and made by people who loved monsters as much as they loved midnight movies. It's the kind of film that played best with friends, a VHS, and the lights just low enough that you weren't sure what might crawl out of the shadows next. Asylum, 1972. A young psychiatrist arrives at a grim, secluded asylum to interview for a job. To prove his worth, the facility's director tasks him with a twisted game. Interview 4 inmates and identify which one is the asylum's former head doctor. What follows is an anthology of 4 dark, interconnected tales of terror, all penned by psycho author Robert Bloch. From a freezer hiding a gruesome reanimated secret to a tailor crafting a suit from a mysterious, magical fabric, the stories are macabre, stylish, and surreal. Directed by Roy Ward Baker, the film is a high point for Britain's Amicus studio. The atmosphere is thick with British horror royalty, including Peter Cushing, Herbert Lom, and Charlotte Rampling, who anchor the anthology with performances that balance the campy premise with genuine dread. The practical effects provide a tactile, handmade charm that defines the era. Asylum works because of its tight narrative structure. The framing story keeps the tension high, blurring the line between doctor and patient until the final, twist-filled reveal. It's a definitive piece of 70s portmanteau horror that proves the creepiest place to be is trapped in someone else's madness. Kill List, 2011. 2 former soldiers now working as contract killers accept a job meant to solve their mounting financial problems. The assignment seems straightforward, a series of targets provided by a shadowy client. But each killing reveals something deeply unsettling. The people they're sent to eliminate behave strangely, sometimes grateful, as if they know what's coming. What begins as a grounded crime story slowly unravels into something far more disturbing. The film follows the disintegration of both men as their work grows more ritualistic and less rational. Neil Maskell and Michael Smiley play the leads with convincing familiarity, their banter and resentment feeling lived in rather than scripted. Maya Buring adds domestic tension as a partner increasingly alarmed by the psychological toll the job is taking. The performances keep everything rooted in reality, even as the narrative begins to slip out of reach. Violence is abrupt and ugly, staged with a blunt, matter-of-fact intensity that avoids stylization. Wheatley shoots the action with near-documentary immediacy, making each encounter feel unavoidable, rather than sensational. As the story progresses, imagery and structure shift toward folk horror. Symbols, gatherings, and roles that suggest the men were never in control of the job to begin with. Kill List is deliberately destabilizing. It asks the audience to follow familiar genre ground only to quietly remove the map. The final act abandons explanation in favor of implication, forcing viewers to reconsider everything that came before. It's demanding, grim, and intentionally disorienting, but deeply effective. A modern British horror film that lingers because it refuses comfort, clarity, or easy meaning. Assault on Precinct 13, 1976. Assault on Precinct 13, directed by John Carpenter, is one of the most influential action thrillers of the 1970s. It is a masterclass in building suspense and creating tension that lingers long after the film ends. The story takes place on a hot summer night in Los Angeles. A police precinct scheduled for closure finds itself under siege by a violent gang. Inside, a small group of officers and civilians is trapped. Lieutenant Ethan Bishop leads the defense with calm determination. He is joined by Napoleon Wilson, a hardened criminal who proves to be a surprisingly reliable ally. With no reinforcements and limited resources, they must hold off wave after wave of attackers. Every hallway, every stairwell, every flickering light adds to the sense of claustrophobia and imminent danger. Carpenter's direction is precise. The film's minimalist setting contributes to the tension, and the haunting synth-heavy score elevates the suspense. Each moment feels charged with anxiety, and even in quiet scenes, there is a sense of unease that makes the action feel even more intense. The pacing is deliberate, allowing character moments to breathe while keeping the audience engaged and on edge. Beyond the siege and the shootouts, Assault on Precinct 13 is a story about loyalty, survival, and the human instinct to persevere in the face of overwhelming odds. It examines the moral complexity of working together when lives are at stake, especially when the lines between lawmen and criminals become blurred. The film's influence on the action genre is undeniable, inspiring countless remakes, homages, and urban siege thrillers in the decades that followed. For anyone who enjoys taut, suspenseful thrillers with memorable characters and relentless tension, Assault on Precinct 13 remains essential viewing. Its combination of smart storytelling, unforgettable atmosphere, and intense action has stood the test of time. Howling 3, The Marsupials, 1987. Australian marsupial werewolves exist as a separate species from traditional lycanthropes, carrying their young in pouches and living in isolated communities. A young female marsupial werewolf escapes her tribe and comes to Sydney, where a film crew discovers her and casts her in a horror movie. As she integrates into human society and falls for the director's assistant, her tribe hunts for her, while scientists uncover the species' existence, blending romantic drama, creature feature, and satirical comedy about filmmaking and scientific exploitation. Felipe Mora returns, treating the marsupial werewolves as sympathetic, endangered creatures rather than monsters. Imogen Ansley gives the emotional center as the young werewolf, while Lee Biolos plays the romantic interest and Barry Otto the scientist studying the species. The film plays its bizarre premise straight while occasionally leaning into absurd humor, creating an unusual tonal mix that sets it apart from the previous entries. Practical effects emphasize biological differences from traditional werewolves, showing pouches, baby marsupials, and unique transformations. Creature designs are more animalistic than monstrous, and makeup quality varies, sometimes impressive, other times comical. Howling 3 abandons franchise continuity entirely, creating a standalone, eccentric entry whose absurdity and originality make it oddly compelling despite its lost identity. Dead and Buried, 1981. Welcome to Potter's Bluff, where the tourists keep dying, but the town's population somehow stays the same. When Sheriff Dan Gillis investigates a series of brutal murders, he uncovers a conspiracy that challenges everything he knows about life, death, and his seemingly picture-perfect coastal community. At the center of it all is the town mortician, played with unsettling charm by Jack Albertson in his final role. What sets Dead and Buried apart is its unique approach to zombie mythology. This isn't your standard undead apocalypse. It's a slow-burn mystery where the walking dead are hiding in plain sight, going about their daily routines while harboring dark secrets. The film plays with themes of small-town identity and belonging, asking what people might sacrifice to keep their community alive. The murder sequences are notorious for their creativity and brutality. The opening beach sequence sets the tone, turning amateur photography into an instrument of terror. Each death is meticulously photographed by the townspeople, creating a disturbing connection between violence and art. Director Gary Sherman builds tension through careful pacing and misdirection. The film keeps viewers guessing by presenting multiple genres at once. Is this a slasher, a conspiracy thriller, a supernatural horror? The answer is all and none of these, as Dead and Buried carves its own unique path through horror territory. James Ferrantino brings complexity to Sheriff Gillis, portraying a man whose investigation forces him to question not just his town, but his own identity. Meanwhile, Jack Albertson's Dobbs steals every scene as the mortician who takes perhaps too much pride in his work. Their interactions crackle with tension as the truth slowly emerges. The film's screenplay by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett of Alien fame layers mystery upon mystery, leading to one of the most shocking twist endings of the era. Dead and Buried proves that sometimes the most effective horror comes from questioning not just who we can trust, but who we really are. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, 1982. Ditching Michael Myers entirely, Halloween 3 pivots to a chilling tale of corporate evil and deadly Halloween masks. Dr. Dan Chalice and Ellie Grimbridge uncover Silver Shamrock Novelty's sinister plot. Masks laced with ancient Stonehenge fragments, triggered by an inescapable TV jingle to sacrifice millions of children on Halloween night. Director Tommy Lee Wallace crafts eerie, dreamlike sequences. Robotic factory workers, swarming insects bursting from skulls, and Connell Cochran's calmly maniacal monologue on pagan ritual. The relentless Silver Shamrock song burrows into your brain, while practical effects and moody synth score create an unsettling, surreal atmosphere. Initially rejected by fans expecting Myers, Season of the Witch has earned cult reverence for its bold originality and sharp commentary on consumerism. A strange atmospheric oddity of early 80s horror, it stands as the franchise's most daring risk, a late-night gem that proves Halloween could be terrifying in entirely unexpected ways.
That's it for tonight's episode. If you want to help us keep the archive alive and growing, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is somebody's favorite.